Ready to dive deep into something fascinating? Today, we're exploring leadership within associations. And we're going to do that through this really practical guidebook called Liderazgo Associativo. It's all about helping associations move beyond that typical, top-down leadership model and really shake things up.
Yeah, and what's interesting is this guidebook, it doesn't waste any time getting to the heart of the matter.
Right.
It tackles power dynamics head on right from the start. Even kicks off with a quote from Montesquieu. To prevent the abuse of power, it is necessary that power should stop power.
Wow, that's a bold way to open a book.
It is.
It makes you think, how often do we just accept these power structures around us without ever really questioning them?
Right, and that's exactly what this guidebook wants us to do, to reflect on these dynamics
Yeah.
and to think about how they might be holding us back.
So how does it go about doing that?
Well, it throws out these really thought-provoking statements, almost like challenges to conventional wisdom. For example, it questions this assumption that there always has to be someone in charge, or that obedience is like automatically a good thing. These are things we hear so often, right, growing up maybe in organizations. But the book really encourages us to dig deeper, to look at where those beliefs come from.
I love that. It's like it's shining a light on those unconscious biases we might not even realize we have. But what really struck me was the solution it proposes empowerment.
Mm.
It's not just about pointing out problems, it's about offering a pathway to something better.
And it does it in such a practical way. It defines empowerment as, building self-confidence, improving decision-making skills, and that ability to advocate for yourself. The guidebook uses this analogy of an association being like the human body. It can only really thrive when all of its parts are healthy and functioning properly.
So instead of relying on just one head to make all the decisions, it's about empowering each part of the body to contribute and to grow. That makes a lot of sense.
It does.
And it leads to some really fascinating discussions about different leadership styles.
It does. The guidebook uses these animal metaphors, which is so creative and insightful.
Oh, I have to hear about these. Give me some examples.
Okay, so we've got the messianic leader, charismatic, demands loyalty, almost like a lion leading a pride. Then there's the birds in flight model, super efficient, laser focus on reaching a destination, but maybe not so flexible when things change.
Interesting. So even a seemingly positive leadership style, like birds in flight, you're saying there can be drawbacks.
Absolutely.
What are some of the others?
Okay, well, there's the beehive model, highly organized, productive, but can lead to rigid hierarchies. And then we have the herd model, values individual freedom and autonomy, like a herd of wild horses running free, but maybe at the risk of, losing direction.
Wow, these metaphors are so vivid. You can really picture how these different styles play out in the real world. Makes you wonder, what does the guidebook propose as like a better alternative?
That's where things get exciting. It introduces the star model. Every individual contributes their own unique talents and strengths, like stars in a constellation, forming this beautiful, meaningful pattern together.
I love that imagery. Instead of one bright star outshining all the others, it's about recognizing the brilliance of each individual star and how they all contribute to the beauty of the whole constellation. But how do you actually put this star model into practice? It sounds beautiful, but also tricky.
It is, but the guidebook gives us some practical steps. It starts with clear objectives, but not just top-down objectives. It's about everyone understanding the bigger picture and how their personal goals can align with the mission of the association.
So it's less about just following orders and more about feeling a sense of ownership in the work and contributing in a way that's meaningful to each person.
Exactly. It's about that intersection of personal passion and collective purpose. And for this kind of leadership, strong relationships are essential.
Right, you can't have a cohesive constellation without those strong connections between the stars.
That's a great way to put it. The guidebook really stresses nurturing relationships, building that sense of belonging and support.
So it's not just about efficiency and productivity. It's recognizing the human element, creating a positive environment where everyone can thrive.
Precisely. And to further support that thriving, the guidebook highlights continuous learning and mentorship.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you want everyone to feel empowered and contributing their best, you have to invest in their growth.
Absolutely. Creating opportunities to learn from each other, to develop leadership potential. A culture of continuous learning where everyone feels supported and encouraged.
That's a powerful idea, and it takes trust, right?
You're absolutely right. Trust is the foundation of any successful collaboration, and the guidebook really acknowledges that. It stresses building trust through open communication, transparency, and recognizing each other's contributions.
So it's not just giving people more responsibility, it's creating that culture where they feel valued and respected and trusted to make decisions.
Exactly. And to make that happen, clear communication and transparent information flow are key.
Makes sense, because without that, things can fall apart pretty quickly. Miscommunication, lack of information, it can create distrust and resentment.
Absolutely. The guidebook encourages making information readily accessible to all members and creating multiple channels for communication and feedback.
Okay, so we've got clear objectives, strong relationships, continuous learning, trust, open communication. Anything else we need to make this STAR model work?
One more crucial element, embracing individual initiative, encouraging members to take ownership, share their ideas, and initiate projects.
That's a good point. It's about moving away from that wait for instructions mentality to a more proactive, innovative culture. But let's be realistic, putting all of this into practice probably isn't always easy.
You're right, it can be challenging. That's why the guidebook offers practical solutions for common obstacles. It calls them magistral formulas.
Oh, those sound intriguing.
Yeah.
What are some examples of these magistral formulas?
Well, let's say you're struggling with an uneven distribution of tasks. Some members are overloaded, while others aren't contributing enough. The guidebook suggests developing a system of mentorship, pairing experienced members with newer members to help distribute the workload more effectively.
That's a great idea. It addresses the practical issue of, dividing tasks, but also that deeper need for empowering everyone.
Exactly.
What about the challenge of staying connected and informed when everyone's busy with their own tasks?
The guidebook recommends regular project updates, not just for leaders, but for the entire association.
That's so smart. It keeps everyone in the loop and creates that feeling of collective ownership. And what about the often dreaded topic of finances?
You said it. The guidebook encourages making financial information more accessible and integrating financial discussions into regular meetings.
So it's not just about the numbers, it's about empowering everyone to understand the financial health of the association. These magistral formulas really are like a toolkit for tackling those real-world challenges that come up as you're trying to move towards a more shared leadership model.
They are.
I love how practical and actionable they are.
Me too.
Before we move on to part 2, where we'll get even deeper into Liderazgo Associativo, what stood out to you most so far?
I think the emphasis on personal empowerment as the foundation for collective change. It's not about finding that one perfect leader. It's about cultivating that leadership potential within each individual and creating a culture where everyone feels valued and empowered.
I totally agree. It's not a position, it's a mindset. And it's a mindset we can all cultivate both individually and as a group.
Exactly.
So we're going to wrap up part 1 here, but join us next time as we explore even more of the guidebook's insights.
And discover how its message can inspire us to create a new kind of leadership, one that's truly transformative.
See you then.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Liderazgo Associativo. So in part 1, we really explored those practical steps towards shared leadership. Now let's go a little deeper, into the heart of its message, where philosophy meets practical application.
I love that. It's so refreshing to see a guidebook that doesn't just stay on the surface level, but really grapples with, the meaning of leadership.
It does, and it does it in such an engaging way. It uses stories and metaphors to illustrate its points, which really helps to bring those concepts to life.
Yeah, like the story about the receta de la Candona, the recipe from La Candon. What a unique way to talk about leadership.
It is right. It draws inspiration from the Zapatista movement in Mexico, and it really gets into this idea of leading by serving, highlighting the power of humility, and really truly listening to those who are often overlooked.
It reminds me of that whole concept of empowerment, right? Shifting the focus from power over others to empowering them to lead themselves.
Exactly. And that ties into the guidebook's emphasis on personal growth as the foundation for collective action. It encourages you to really look inward, explore your values, beliefs, and motivations.
It's like saying you can't effectively lead others until you've learned to lead yourself.
Precisely. And one of the tools for this self-leadership is what it calls the Compuesto EPSG, which breaks down those elements of empowerment.
Okay, so what are the key ingredients of this compuesto?
Well, it highlights that interplay between emotions, thoughts, personal empowerment, and then group synergy. And it all starts with personal empowerment.
That makes sense. You need to feel grounded in your own sense of self and agency before you can effectively show up in a group.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing you have that power to choose how you respond to situations no matter what's happening around you.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to fill your own cup first before you can give to others.
Perfect analogy. And the guidebook takes us even further with this concept of the virus de empoderamiento, the empowerment virus.
Okay, that sounds a little intimidating at first. Should we be worried about this virus?
Not at all. It's actually a very positive concept.
Hmm.
The virus is a metaphor for how empowerment can spread from person to person,
Mhm.
creating this ripple effect of positive change within a group.
So it's like a beneficial virus. One person's empowerment can inspire and uplift others, leading to a more engaged and energized group overall.
Exactly. And that's where it becomes truly transformative. It's not just about individual growth. It's about that culture of shared leadership where empowerment is just the norm.
It's like shifting the entire ecosystem towards a more collaborative model. But how do you practically facilitate that shift? How do you create that contagious empowerment?
Well, the guidebook suggests tapping into the power of technology. In today's world, we have so many tools to connect and collaborate.
That's true. It's easier than ever to stay connected even when people are miles apart.
Exactly. Websites, email lists, forums, even video conferencing to make information transparent and encourage participation.
Using technology to empower, not to isolate. Speaking of overcoming obstacles, I'm curious to learn more about those magistral formulas.
Yeah, they're really valuable for those real-world challenges. For example, lots of associations struggle to find time for personal connection when everyone's so busy. The guidebook solution: prioritize relationships.
It sounds so simple, but we often forget about that human connection.
We do. It reminds us to make time for those informal gatherings, those check-ins, and just connecting as people.
Yeah. And what about that challenge of fostering continuous learning?
Mentorship is key. Pairing experienced members with newer members, creating those opportunities for shared learning and development.
Makes sense. It benefits both sides.
It does.
And for those who maybe aren't as vocal, the guidebook emphasizes clear communication and information flow to make sure everyone feels included and empowered to participate.
Exactly. Now remember that quote from Montesquieu. To prevent the abuse of power, it is necessary that power should stop power.
Such a powerful statement.
It-
It really challenges us to question those traditional hierarchies and think about alternative models.
Right. And that leads us back to those animal metaphors the guidebook uses.
I love those metaphors.
Me too. Remember the messianic leader, charismatic, but maybe a little too dominant?
Right.
Then there's the birds in flight model. Efficient, but maybe not so adaptable. The beehive model, organized, but potentially with those power imbalances.
And of course, the herd model, which values freedom, but maybe at the risk of losing direction.
Each one gives us a different perspective on those strengths and potential pitfalls.
So it's not about labeling ourselves or others, but about developing that self-awareness.
Exactly. And with that in mind, the guidebook proposes the star model,
Ah, yes,
where everyone shines their own unique light,
exactly. Valuing each person's contributions.
creating a culture where everyone feels seen and heard and empowered.
And to put that into practice, the guidebook lays out those practical steps, starting with clear objectives,
Nurturing relationships, continuous learning,
building trust, communication.
embracing initiative.
Planning.
It's like a roadmap for creating that culture of shared leadership.
It is. And to help individuals on their own leadership journeys, the guidebook offers the Magic Mirror questionnaire.
Oh yeah, with those fun questions.
Like, when faced with a challenge, do you react like a boomerang, a brick, or a sponge? Makes you think.
It does, and it gives you feedback based on your answers, right?
It does. Helps you understand your strengths and weaknesses as a leader.
Like having a personal coach in your pocket. But the book also emphasizes collective reflection.
Absolutely. Creating space for open and honest conversations about leadership.
Bringing those individual reflections into a shared space.
Right.
And that can be through facilitated discussions, team building exercises, even bringing in an outside perspective.
It can.
The key is to make it a safe and supportive environment.
Yes.
Speaking of supportive environments, the guidebook reminds us of the power of language,
Oh, absolutely. Words can either empower or disempower.
which is where the alternative dictionary comes in.
Love this idea. It's like a language makeover. It is. So instead of president, we can try coordinator.
Yes.
And instead of shutting down a new idea with, I already knew that, we can say, what can we learn from this experience?
Exactly. Subtle shifts, but they can make a difference.
They can. But, one of the biggest fears about shared leadership is that fear of chaos.
I get that. We're so used to that one leader calling all the shots.
Right. Who's steering the ship?
Exactly.
What if everyone wants to go in a different direction?
The book assures us that it's not about abandoning structure. It's about finding that balance between autonomy and alignment.
And how do we strike that balance?
Clear communication, defined roles, and shared decision-making. Using collaborative planning methods, regular check-ins to make sure everyone's on the same page.
So not throwing out structure altogether, but creating a more flexible structure.
Exactly. Before we wrap up this part, I want to touch on that idea of collective action.
That's a theme that runs throughout the book,
He does.
reminding us that real transformation happens when we work together.
Leveraging our collective wisdom.
No one person has all the answers.
Right.
And the book uses that metaphor of the human body.
Just like a body thrives when all its parts are working together.
So too does an association when everyone feels valued and connected to that purpose.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the virus del empoderamiento, that contagious energy spreading throughout the group.
I love that metaphor.
It's about shifting from that mindset of individual power to one of collective empowerment.
And that's a powerful idea to consider as we move into the final part, where we'll talk about how to put all of this into action.
But first, we want to hear from you, our listeners. What stands out to you about the guidebook's approach to leadership?
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Liderazgo Associativo. We've journeyed through those practical steps, the inspiring metaphors, and really gotten to the philosophical heart of this guidebook. Now it's time for the most important part. What does it all mean for you, and how can you actually use these ideas to make a difference?
That's where the rubber meets the road, right? We've explored all these fascinating concepts, but how do we translate them into action? And this guidebook, I have to say, it delivers. It wraps up with this really powerful call to action, reminding us that we don't have to settle for those, traditional hierarchical models of leadership, the ones we've inherited.
It's so easy to just accept things as they are. But Liderazgo Associativo reminds us that another leadership is possible, one that's rooted in collaboration, in shared responsibility, and in empowering every individual.
But it's not going to just magically appear. We have to build it, and it starts with each of us examining our own beliefs and behaviors, challenging the status quo, and looking for opportunities to empower ourselves and others.
It can feel overwhelming, though. Where do you even begin to shift an entire culture of leadership?
The guidebook says start small. Focus on making a difference within your own sphere of influence. Maybe it's your association or your workplace or even your family or a community group.
Right.
Think back to those magistral formulas.
Those practical solutions for overcoming obstacles.
Exactly. Experiment with new ways of communicating and delegating and making decisions.
And don't be afraid to shake things up with the language you use. Remember the alternative dictionary with those collaborative phrases?
Yes. Even small shifts in the words we use can have a big impact.
Instead of president, try coordinator.
Yeah.
Instead of I already knew that, try what can we learn from this experience?
Exactly. Creating that sense of shared ownership.
But even more than specific techniques, it's about cultivating the right mindset.
It's
What kind of mindset are we talking about?
an attitude of openness, curiosity, and that willingness to learn and grow. Because shared leadership is not a destination, it's a journey. There will be challenges, moments of doubt, maybe even some resistance.
That's when it's easy to get discouraged and fall back into old patterns. But the guidebook reminds us that it's worth the effort.
It is.
When we embrace this approach, we unlock the potential of every individual.
Yes.
And we create a more fulfilling experience for everyone. It's recognizing we're all in this together, and we can achieve so much more when we support each other's growth.
The guidebook ends with this powerful question echoing its central message. Otro liderazgo es posible. Another leadership is possible. So how will you contribute to making this new kind of leadership a reality?
That's the question we all need to ask ourselves. Will you be that spark that ignites the virus del empoderamiento in your own community? Will you step up, challenge the status quo, and create space for others to shine?
It's a choice we all have to make. But as our deep dive into Liderazgo Associativo has shown us another leadership is possible. And when we work together with intention and courage, we can make it happen.
That's a wrap on our deep dive into Liderazgo Associativo. We hope you found it thought-provoking and inspiring. Now go forth and lead with courage, with compassion, and a commitment to shared empowerment.